My name is Patrice Vahad. I represent the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Guinea. Guinea is a country in West Africa endowed with lots of immense natural resources, including mining. I would like to share today my personal experience of championing the right to development from the field perspective. But before giving my personal account of what we do in Guinea, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. About 30 years ago, I was still a student human rights defender in college, and I was often challenged by my neighbors on campus and by people who could not understand why the organization that I was working with and for was exclusively focusing on civil and political rights, while the casualties of poverty and deprivation were rampant and were far more than police brutality, for example, in the context of a one-party system. I must admit I had no answer to this at that time. But I knew that I should be part of a paradigm shift to pay equal attention to socioeconomic, civil and political rights. It was at the era of the end of the Cold War, but also when the World Conference on Human Rights, which led to the creation of OHCHR, took place. As an advocate from the Global South, I realized, drawing lessons from the Global North, that one of the key predicaments for peace and development in the Global North was to pay equal attention to informed participation in economic, social, cultural life in an open society. And so my dream was to be part of the paradigm shift as far as the Global South is concerned. I admit today that I could not articulate this more concisely as I can do today, but when I joined the law school, thinkers and writers like Keba Mbaye from Senegal further consolidated my interest in pursuing the right to development. In 1993, I joined the social pressure group in preparation for a World Conference on Human Rights, focusing on the African delegation. And our interest was to ensure that the post-Cold War era pays equal attention to all rights. And the right to development had already also been recognized and articulated in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, giving us the legal ground for advocating further for a global shift. And so, finally, we did realize that when the General Assembly closed the World Conference and created the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, one of its very specific mandates was to pursue and to follow up on the work on the right to development, which was to our great satisfaction. And so I joined and I continued to advocate within the social movement, but I realized that on the ground, after the World Conference, there was still a gap at the level of the civil society. And so I decided to continue working on this and to investigate the reason and the role that civil society could play in advancing the right to development. My determination was also grounded on the fact that from history, it's clear that the practice and the reform and human rights field emanate from within communities and from within civil society before they are articulated in nice words at the international level and implemented by stakeholders and state. Gladly, as I joined OHCHR as a staff member, I continued to work on the right to development, and I realized that a lot of immense work was being done at the level of Geneva, which needed to translate in the field. And that's why I have been working on the right to development from that perspective. In Guinea, UN Human Rights and other UN agencies have prioritized supporting national authorities in the pursuit of the right to development, focusing on the sustainable development goals as one of the operational ways for achieving that goal. My understanding is that the right to development shapes development in a manner that integrates all rights, civil, political, social, economic, and cultural rights. And so the 2030 agenda is perhaps, and today, the most advanced way in which the international community can advance the realization of the right to development. And that's the reason why in Guinea, we have prioritized within the United Nations Development Assistance Framework, the UNDAF, to work on the realization of the SDGs as a way to achieving the right to development. We do, though, in 3 different manners. And number 1, focusing on the first axis of the UNDAF, promoting good governance, the rule of law, and democracy. Secondly, scaling up food security and management of natural resources. And lastly, an inclusive development of human capital. And as you can see, the right to development, as understood in the Declaration on the Right to Development, addresses all those 3 aspects, which is very important. And I would like now to finish by letting you know how we see the intertwine between the 3 pillars of the UNDAF and the realization of the right to development as articulated in the UN Declaration on the Right to Development. First, as a standalone right to participate and to contribute and to enjoy the economic, social, and cultural right, the right to development gives a framework for addressing the first axis of the UN UNDAF in Guinea. Secondly, as a composite right which brings together the internationally recognized rights such as economic, social, and cultural rights, it addresses all 3 axes of the UNDAF for Guinea. And finally, it represents a vector right through which the other rights are realized. And so, in Guinea, what we've planned to do and what we've been doing, number 1 is to perhaps address the knowledge gap which exists first within the UN community, to build the capacity of UN agencies to articulate a broad-based approach to the pursuit of the sustainable development goals. Secondly, to also expand the knowledge of the civil society so that they can play their monitoring, watchdog, reporting role in this. And finally, to work and engage with the governments in a variety of manners for them to prioritize the realization of socioeconomic and cultural rights, and for that matter, the right to development in a manner. So what we've been doing last year, we've produced a compendium of all the recommendations that pertain to socioeconomic and cultural rights, and brought them together in one document which we have been sharing with the authorities, discussing on how best they could implement it at local level. And secondly, assisting them in the process of preparing for the next UPR. And as you will see, because we've explained the importance and the centrality of the right to development in every aspect of the work and the priorities set by the government, one of the recommendations certainly tabled before the Human Rights Council will be to advance the work on the right to development. So for the first time, an explicit recommendation would go towards not just working on the SDGs, but on the pursuit of the right to development as an ongoing and a long process. So this is my experience, and I would like to encourage you, each and every one of you, as I said before, if we want to advance the right to development practically, but also normatively, it has to come from the field. It must come from the field. And today we are at the crossroads of history where the difference does not lie in pursuing one right versus the other. The difference lies in our ability to blend all rights together, and the right to development, no more than or no less than any other articulation, is the best way to achieve this. Thank you very much.